If even 10 mechanics couldn't start this Porsche, what do you think you're going to do? The phrase echoed through the military workshop yard like a mocking punch, tearing through the cold morning air and making all the soldier mechanics chuckle softly, certain that this woman wouldn't stand a chance against the red machine, which stood there like a wounded animal. But while the owner crossed his arms, laughing loudly and displaying his arrogance as if it were more valuable than the car itself, she simply walked to the Porsche with firm steps, as if she were returning home, not entering a field of humiliation. The sun beat down on the red bodywork, reflecting an almost defiant gleam, and each reflection seemed to throw in her face the same question everyone was thinking. What can one woman do alone that 10 trained men couldn't? But at that moment, when she tied her hair back, put on her gloves and opened the hood with the calm of someone who sees what no one else sees, something changed in the air. Laughter turned to silence. Arrogance turned to expectation. And doubt, that sharp doubt that was always placed on her shoulders, began to tremble even before the Porsche started. Because without saying a word, she had already shown that she wasn't there to prove anything to anyone. She was there to make the impossible inevitable. And everyone realized this, the exact moment the key finally turned for the first time. Before we delve into this amazing story, tell me which city and state you're watching from. Leave a comment and I'll reply with gratitude. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and like this video. We want to share more stories like this. As soon as the echo of the challenge faded within the workshop walls, the protagonist advanced toward the red Porsche with the intensity of someone carrying a lifetime of underestimation on her shoulders. The yard was full, but it felt as if the whole world had stopped to watch her every move. The mechanics lined up, all men, maintained expressions that mixed curiosity and disbelief, as if they expected to see her give up before even touching the bodywork. The car's owner, a businessman with an aggressive voice and exaggerated confidence, watched with his arms crossed and chest puffed out, convinced that she would be nothing more than temporary entertainment, before he proved once again that mechanics is a man's thing. However, she wasn't seeking approval. She was seeking answers. The Porsche before her wasn't just a broken car. It was the perfect symbol of so many closed doors, so many disapproving glances, so many harsh words thrown against her abilities. And as her gloves touched the sun-baked carcass, something inside her rekindled like the roar of an engine trying to awaken after months of slumber. The first signs of the problem began to reveal themselves quickly before her experienced eyes. Her gaze swept over every cable, every hose, every point where any other professional would have spent hours evaluating without making a single step forward. She didn't limit herself to checking the basics. She went straight to the root of the fault, as if an invisible map were drawn on the palm of her hand. That red Porsche wasn't a mechanical monster. It was a puzzle she was already beginning to mentally assemble. Meanwhile, behind her, the conversations began to dissipate. Silence fell almost imperceptibly, as if everyone were hypnotized by the fact that she didn't hesitate, didn't tremble, didn't seek help. Working alone, disassembling details like someone opening a door locked for years, she turned her body, lifted a piece, and for the first time looked directly at the owner of the Porsche, who approached with a crooked and arrogant smile, expecting an explanation. But what he received was a diagnosis that none of the 10 previous mechanics had even imagined. She informed him with technical precision and a firm voice that the problem wasn't where everyone had looked. The defect was hidden in a specific connection, worn and poorly installed, something that required delicacy and meticulous reading to identify. The owner's expression subtly changed. The mechanics took an almost involuntary step back, and the entire yard held its breath when she asked for just a simple tool, something that, for anyone else there, would be insufficient for an engine of that caliber. However, for her, that tool was exactly what was needed to begin the recovery of the red machine. Touching the critical part, each of her gestures conveyed such solid confidence that it began to erode the arrogance of all those who had never believed in her talent. And at that moment, something greater than mechanics began to be repaired. The realization that no one there was prepared to see the impossible become reality in the hands of a woman who owed nothing to anyone but herself. When she bent down again before the red Porsche, the entire atmosphere of the workshop seemed trapped in an almost cinematic suspense, as if each screw were waiting for the exact moment to reveal its truth. The soldier mechanics, once so confident in their traditional diagnoses, now watched in absolute silence, like students before a teacher they never admitted needing. She moved her hands with almost choreographed precision. A minimal adjustment here, a quick test there, a light touch on the wiring harness, and each movement revealed not only technical knowledge, but a rare instinct. The kind of instinct that can't be learned from a manual, taught in a course, or passed on in a textbook. It was the kind of sensitivity that only arises in those who see mechanics as a vocation, not an obligation. While the sun reflected on the red bodywork, creating a shine that seemed to match the rhythm of her absolute focus, she moved wires aside, checked connectors, and found old marks of a poorly done repair, a careless job that generated a silent domino effect over the months, until it resulted in the total collapse of the system. It was an invisible mistake to ordinary eyes, but glaring to her, who could see beyond the surface. And as she identified the source, her face remained serene, determined, aware that there lay the key to transforming humiliation into victory. The Porsche owner, once ironic and full of certainty, was beginning to lose the firmness in his gaze. He approached slowly, as if trying to understand exactly what he was witnessing, but without the courage to admit he was wrong. His steps reflected the gradual fall of his arrogance, as if each inch closer to her was also an inch further away from his macho conviction. The mechanics around him, accustomed to seeing him shout, order, and humiliate, now watched silently, realizing that this woman was dismantling more than an engine. She was dismantling an entire ego, panel by panel. And it was at that exact moment, when she pulled the faulty connector with the gentleness of someone handling something precious, that an inescapable revelation imposed itself on everyone. Porsche didn't need brute force, nor random parts replacement, much less hours of trial and error. Porsche needed someone who listened to the engine, who read the engine, who respected the engine, and none of those men had done that. She lifted the worn part for all to see, twirling it between her fingers as if presenting the final proof of a solved crime. The silence grew heavy. The owner paled. One of the soldiers swallowed hard. Another looked away. No one dared comment. Because, at that moment, it was clear she had found what everyone else had ignored. It wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It was competence. Pure, raw, indisputable competence. And as she replaced the new part she had requested minutes before, she took a deep breath and began to rebuild the connection with the delicacy of someone who restores life to what has been destroyed by the negligence of others. It was almost like watching surgery, precise, calm, impeccable. The entire workshop watched as if they were witnessing something greater than simple automotive maintenance. And indeed they were. They were witnessing a woman who, without raising her voice, was rewriting what everyone there believed about limits, capacity, and strength. And that, in itself, made the air vibrate, as if the Porsche were about to awaken even before the key touched the ignition. As she stood, wiping her hands on a cloth worn from the intense routine of the military workshop, the late afternoon light streamed across the courtyard like a natural spotlight, highlighting her figure before all those who, hours before, had doubted her without a second thought. The red Porsche remained there, elegant and silent, like a luxury animal awaiting the final command to awaken. But at that specific moment, the tension hanging over the place no longer came from the car. It came from the wounded pride of each mechanic who observed in silence, from the owner who already showed clear signs of discomfort, and from the inevitable feeling that something grand was about to happen. She took a deep breath, positioned herself in front of the driver's seat, and simply asked them to make room. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried such firm authority that no one dared to object. Everyone took a few steps back, as if they felt they were about to witness a historic moment, one of those recounted for years as a living legend of the corporation. When she sat in the driver's seat, the impeccable leather seemed to mold to her body as if recognizing her presence. Her hands glided across the steering wheel with the delicacy of someone conversing with something living. And before turning the key, she closed her eyes for a brief second, mentally listening to the sound that engine should make. It wasn't superstition. It was technique, it was connection, it was experience combined with a sensitivity that made her different from everyone else there. Meanwhile, the owner of the Porsche took 2 steps forward, gathering the courage to ask if she was sure of what she was doing. Her answer was a firm, confident look that said more than any words could express. I know exactly what I'm doing. And it was precisely this quiet confidence that dismantled the last barrier of doubt that still lingered. The key turned. The first sound was low, almost timid, like a heart hesitating before beating again. But soon after, the sound evolved, gained body, vibrated through the bodywork, and the deep rumble of the engine finally filled the workshop. It was as if the Porsche, dormant for weeks, had finally found someone who understood it well enough to bring it back to life. The mechanic's eyes widened. Some put their hands to their mouths. Others took an involuntary step back, as if they had witnessed a mechanical miracle. The owner froze, completely without reaction, with the confused expression of a man who has just seen his own arrogance turn to dust before him. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate, didn't seek applause. She simply turned off the engine, got out of the car with the tranquility of someone who knows they have won, and let the silence work in her favor. Around her, the impact was immediate and profound. One of the soldier mechanics tried to justify it, claiming they hadn't had enough time to thoroughly analyze the car. Another said the problem might be recent. A third insinuated it could only be luck. But none of them dared to finish the sentence, because she simply lifted the worn part she had replaced and explained clearly and objectively that the defect was old and visible to anyone who truly analyzed it carefully. That is, to anyone who wasn't blinded by their own prejudice. And there was the truth they were all trying to avoid. They hadn't failed due to a lack of skill, but due to a lack of humility. No one wanted to listen to the engine as she did. No one wanted to see beyond the obvious. No one wanted to believe that a woman could master what they couldn't. The Porsche owner, in turn, approached her with slow, almost regretful steps. His face, previously dominated by arrogance, now revealed a mixture of shock, shame, and restrained admiration. He tried to find words, but all that came out was an apology so timid it seemed too small in the face of the magnitude of what she had done. She listened, but didn't accept it immediately. She only said that apologies are valid when accompanied by change, and that response echoed among the men there like an unexpected moral lesson, as accurate as the diagnosis she had made minutes before. It was as if the Porsche's engine had taught them less than she had just taught them. Respect is earned, yes, but it also needs to be offered, and there in that parking lot, it had been lacking from the very first moment. After that, something even more surprising happened. One of the mechanics, the youngest of them, approached her fearlessly and asked if she could teach him to identify defects like that one. She looked up, analyzed the sincerity in his eyes, and, for the first time that afternoon, smiled. She said she could, provided he was willing to learn with an open heart and without carrying the same limitations that so many there still held. And that's how the cycle of change began. One soldier called another, then another, and in a few minutes the entire workshop was gathered around her, listening attentively to each explanation she gave about the importance of visual reading, touch, fine observation, patience, and, above all, respect for the machine. For her, the engine always speaks. It just takes someone willing to listen. The owner, realizing the power of that moment, asked to speak with her again. He said he would hire anyone skilled enough to do what she had done, and that the red Porsche would now be entrusted exclusively to her. But she took a deep breath, stepped back, and calmly said that she didn't need a job offer. What she wanted was recognition, equality, and respect. And there it was, before everyone, the great turning point. It wasn't about money, nor about status, nor about million-dollar cars. It was about being seen, being valued, being recognized for what she had always been: exceptional. The afternoon turned into night, and even though the workshop had resumed its routine, that moment would never be forgotten. Because it wasn't just the Porsche that had started up, it was the conscience of everyone present. And as she walked out of the yard with calm steps, the red light of the Porsche reflected on the ground as a final reminder that no one can extinguish the brilliance of someone born to make the impossible seem simple. Her story, that day, didn't end with the roar of an engine, but with the admiring silence of everyone who finally understood the value of her talent. And there, among machines and disbelieving men, she established herself as the only one capable of transforming an impending humiliation into an absolute victory. When she finally left the workshop behind, walking down the narrow corridor leading to the outside parking lot, she could still hear echoes of the conversations she had unintentionally sparked. It was as if every mechanic had suddenly begun to reassess their own posture, their own way of working, their own behavior towards someone who, for so long, had been underestimated out of pure prejudice. The protagonist walked slowly, allowing the light night breeze to touch her face, as if the breeze were there to wash away all the layers of humiliation that had settled upon her over the years. And as she moved forward, a new feeling blossomed in her chest. For the first time in a long time, she had been seen. Not as an exception, not as a curiosity, not as the woman who works with cars, but as someone capable, complete, unbeatable. And this perception grew within her with each step, as if the earth itself sustained her silent victory. When she reached the exit, she saw from afar the owner of the red Porsche standing beside the now fully functional car. He held an envelope in his hands and seemed restless, like someone still carrying a lingering guilt that needed to be resolved. She didn't approach hastily. She maintained her calm, her posture, her firmness. And when she finally stopped before him, what happened wasn't arrogance, nor pride, nor a haughty victory. What happened was a heavy, profound silence, laden with everything he wanted to say, but didn't know how. Finally, he extended the envelope to her, saying that inside was the service invoice, the complete inspection report, and a thank you bonus. But she didn't take it. On the contrary, she crossed her arms and asked, with a tranquility that could shatter any mask, "Do you really believe that money buys respect?" The man swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the question pierce through his own mistakes. He tried to justify himself, saying that he never meant to offend her, that he was only frustrated with the previous mechanics, that he didn't believe it was possible for someone to fix the car so quickly. But she interrupted with the same serenity she had used to open the hood hours before. She said she didn't need justifications. She needed change. I needed men who wouldn't laugh when a woman walked into a mechanic's yard. I needed professionals who judged talent by results, not gender. The Porsche owner was speechless, but something on his face showed he was understanding. Perhaps too late, perhaps imperfectly, but understanding. And that's when the unexpected happened. He placed the envelope on the hood, took a deep breath, and said he wanted to learn from her, as he had never seen anyone understand a car in that way. The phrase sounded genuine, not flattery, but recognition. She remained silent for a few seconds, not giving in to the impulse to forgive too quickly, and simply said that teaching wasn't a problem, as long as he entered the workshop as an apprentice, not as an arrogant owner. The man smiled shyly, accepting the condition with the humility he should have shown from the beginning. But before turning to leave, he did something that changed the whole dynamic. He opened the Porsche door and asked carefully, so as not to sound bossy, that she take one last spin in the car. Not as a test, not as a repair, but as recognition that no one there, except her, was worthy of driving it at that moment. The proposal took her by surprise, not by the invitation itself, but by realizing that even someone so arrogant had been transformed by what she had witnessed that day. She took a deep breath, agreed to get into the car, and as she placed her hands on the steering wheel, felt that sense of belonging again, as if the machine recognized her presence and bowed to her skill. The engine roared with life when she started it, this time much stronger, cleaner, more balanced than before. The Porsche seemed to celebrate the freedom of having been understood and not just repaired. She sped down the moonlit road, driving with the precision of someone who masters both the technique and the emotion of driving. And each curve, each acceleration, each vibration of the engine seemed to confirm something she had always known, but that the world insisted on denying. She was born for this, for difficult machines, for impossible challenges, to silence the laughter of those who doubt. And when she finally parked again in front of the workshop, under the watchful gaze of the owner and the mechanics who had followed to watch her return, the protagonist got out of the car with the same proud posture as before. But now she carried something more, the weight of a victory that no one could deny. The entire workshop, even in darkness, seemed illuminated by a different kind of light. Not the sun's light, not the spotlight's light, not the Porsche's headlights' light. It was the symbolic light of respect that had finally been earned, not by noise, not by force, but by unquestionable competence. And as she walked away, leaving everyone there reflecting on her actions, the certainty that echoed through the yard was the same one she carried in her heart. Some engines only work in the hands of those who truly listen, and some stories only become legends in the hands of those who never, ever lower their heads in the face of others' doubt.